Machine here, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel. 20-minute video for 2 minutes worth of content. Gold.
With so many countries in lockdown, with flight status, immigration status denied or limited, it's obviously causing us to have no offline events pretty much, and as a result everything's switched to online, and we're having similar kinds of events sort of with what's possible. And so obviously this in itself brings up a lot of the old issues as to why online play sucks, which I always said back in the day and people ignored and tried to just cognitively use dissonance to believe that it was fine and that the teams that lost online just weren't as good. But it's not as simple as just that. Like, listen, yes, I'm sure that's part of the reason why there are way more upsets, especially not just upsets, but like no-name teams like Heretics doing way better than you'd expect them to do. Yes, there are too many games constantly. Another problem that you tend to have with online competitions. Yeah, it's a problem that regions are divided up into tournaments so that you don't get the big tournaments that we had, whether they're offline or online, that had the top 10 teams in the world play each other, which is kind of the lifeblood of the Counter-Strike circuit. By the way, just as an aside, where are all the NPCs and all the fuckers in the industry who never shut the fuck up with that common refrain of like, oh, wouldn't it be great if like North American teams were divided away from the European teams, and then what happened is they only met like every, like so often at the big tournament, like wouldn't it be so hype, wouldn't like the storylines build up, like, well, okay, how have you enjoyed, forget the online component, you've still seen Counter-Strike played, how have you enjoyed Team Liquid and EG being in that shitty little pond of NA, away from Astralis, Fnatic, Mouse Sports, Navi, all these people, or Navi even, being trapped over in the CIS region, now losing to absolute bombs, or just unknown people, as opposed to playing at these tournaments. Have you enjoyed that? Has that been good? Has it been helping build up storylines for when they meet? Of course it hasn't, whether it's online or offline. It just shows how in practice it's such a nonsense idea. What they really mean is, this is the flaw people make. You've identified a problem. Oh, sometimes these teams play too often, or they play too often for a storyline to properly percolate and simmer and get, yeah, the solution, though, is not the solution you presented. I agree there's a problem, but there are different solutions to be had. I mean, anyone who follows Formula 1 knows actually people play it every month can be brilliant. It's just whether or not they play every week. There's a million factors. It's a side video of its own, right? But the worst part for me of this online era is the historical impact it will have. Obviously, I care a lot about history. It's one of the reasons I'm the esports historian. It's one of the reasons I've made that a focus of my work for almost a 20-year period at this point in time. And I can see already, first of all, just the online component. Yeah, it means, you know what, teams aren't playing with the same intensity, the same focus, the same level of consistent excellence that they would be or would apply at the big offline tournaments. Now, there's one or two cases where you can go, well, maybe that would happen anyway. The idea it's happening across the board, though, like, you know, it beggars belief, doesn't it? Like, the top 5 in the world doesn't just suddenly fall off a fucking cliff when it's on land, do they? One or two of them do, a couple of them get stronger, someone else joins it. Like, that just doesn't happen the way it's going now. So, the problem with this is, yeah, on one level you can say adaptation of playing online has been quite poor, the way people have played as if it was still a LAN game. Yeah, that's probably not ideal. Listen, I get all that, but my problem is this. You watch the teams generally, they still don't look like they play at 100%. By the way, just like in the old online leagues of yesteryear. Now, true, it's not quite as bad. Like, people aren't just doing stuff like... People used to literally in some of those online, like, EPL leagues where you played 1 billion games. People would literally sometimes just run strats, use it as practice between two lands. Or they'd try out a silly map just to see if they could work it in their map pool. Things that you wouldn't do if it was a big LAN tournament, you were in the same scenario. But even so, you get so many underwhelming matches in this online play. Listen, every now and then you get a really good one. Two teams just play well, the economy fakes it and makes it look like it's good. Or sometimes in the playoffs, mainly just semis, not finals, you get a really straight fire semi-final, it's a banger match. Yeah, okay, that happens sometimes. So my problem basically is this. This era right now will have an asterisk. Doesn't matter that it's not our fault, that we can't do anything about it, that everyone wishes we were in different circumstances, that the teams now who succeeded were underdogs, probably then will get their success downplayed, or people will say, oh, who gives a fuck, it's just online. Yeah, all that may be the case, but it's just going to be a fact. It's going to be the way it goes, that this will have an asterisk. It'll be called, I hope, the online era. Like, it's a way that we'll be able to mentally consign it and not have to think about it having too much long-lasting impact in the way that we scrutinise and heavily expect changes or adaptation or even like culpability for losses when it's offline. So one of the issues here is a lot of the best storylines have been completely butchered or just straight up crippled and cannot recover fully from what has happened in these months off. Like, remember, Before this lockdown, Na'Vi was the best team in the world. They'd just beaten Astralis in 2 straight best-of-3 series. They'd had an incredibly dominant win. Simple was in God mode again, and the narrative was finally Simple has the help. Maybe he can win the next major. Maybe they could have an era if things go well. That's gone completely. Now he's getting banged out by fucking people some of you couldn't even name in online play over in that CIS region. Fnatic hadn't ever placed below top 4. They were the most consistent team in the world. They were the hardest team in the world, arguably, to eliminate, along with Astralis. That's gone. They finished 12th place in that fucking Road to Rio and looked absolutely dreadful just in that one tournament. Then you have Mouse Sports, who had that magical run of making all those finals in a row. Like, they matched up with every opponent. All the players were in good form. Carrigan had found the formula. That's all gone to shit, hasn't it? They've been absolutely dreadful for the last month and a half. So are we really just going to memory hole these games? Are we going to come on with the Men in Black thing? Pay attention here, please, for a second. And then just pretend it never happened, right, when online play comes back. Because even if we do, which I almost feel like we should, I'm sorry, it's just the nature of Counter-Strike, there's no way we can just take those narratives and go, it's all right, take this part out, stitch them back together, there we go, now he's back online like that. I'm sorry, that won't work. In fact, those teams essentially will have to outrageously overperform in their first tournaments to even make you mentally think you could connect those dots and skip the bit in the middle. It also, quite frankly, which being honest, it just sucks that the online element legitimately could be killing some lineups and some teams. Like, Mouse Sports is the most obvious answer. Even if I was in Mouse Sports, as much as I'm like, let them get another LAN at least, part of me just thinks, how much is enough? Like, they've had so many bad results. Like, come on, eventually you have to do something, right? Doesn't matter what excuse you have. How about Na'Vi? Listen, Na'Vi, I believe, just if you know how stubborn they are and how difficult it has been for them to acquire talent, which bizarrely goes to every other fucking CIS team, I think Na'Vi probably would have stuck with it anyway and would have expected Simple to just card carry them and seem to think that's just a normal, reasonable expectation for a player, much like fucking Michael Jordan and the old school Bulls of the 80s. But even so, there's a world in which that Perfecto guy might already be done, and he only played a couple of LANs. They might get rid of another player. Maybe old Flame Dogger actually sadly goes and has to step out the lineup, or they bring in some other big name. Maybe they panic and recruit a Team Spirit player who we wouldn't know yet if that guy would work at the big Tier 1 LANs yet. They've only been to Star Series and then some of the Tier 2 LANs or the Asia Minor, right? So then also, I'll just throw in there, Evil Geniuses is under insane pressure right now. They've already fired a coach. I could see in-game leader getting fired, Tarek getting fired. There's a lot of moves could happen. Someone buying some of their players, someone pouncing as an opportunistic move. I've heard all sorts of fucking things about Astralis. That's why that whole angle of them adding those players always was suspicious to me. If you know financially where the org is at, if you know where some of the players' heads at, where for their careers, if you see how they appear to, in the org, envision what the product is, it's not just putting out a world-class Counter-Strike team anymore. It's about flipping the team. It's about selling players. There's all sorts of shit and getting much more investment through the door today with crazy little news stories. So, listen, we're all dealing with the situation in whatever way we can. We're getting what we can, which is some online games. It's better than nothing, absolutely. I'm totally on board with that. We still get to have entertainment. There's still sometimes good matches, still fun. There's still interesting, like, potential matchups even when they don't deliver. The talent, the players, TOs, they can all still operate. They can all still succeed. They can all still make a living. That's important. We're keeping the scene warmed up, so that when we do get offline play, at least we have some storylines, even if we're taking them from online to offline, which is something we'll do. At least we'll have something to keep going. We can't just be like, well, even though it's October now, hit this LAN, like, remember back in March, this team was back? Like, you can't do that. That just wouldn't work. So we have to have something to go with. I'm with you on that angle. But the problem is, I just hope that when we get to offline play, people now really understand some of the problems of online play if they didn't get it yet. And also, even though it's going to be very hard, it's always so hard in life to maintain perspective. You basically have to sit there and do a thought exercise and remove yourself, detach and look at from the bigger picture to kind of gain that perspective. Because when people say get perspective, they don't mean from your own eyes where you are now. They mean look at the bigger picture, look at things around you, how things interact with you, what you're gaining, what you're losing. So in that sense, I really, really hope that despite the fact we're basically going to have to consign this to the rubbish bin of history, that people don't look at this era right now and take offline play for granted ever again. I hope we appreciate it for how fucking amazing it is. It is really the reason I want at least watch the esports side of CSGO particularly. And even if it's just for a little while, that we really embrace those first big offline tournaments, because they're going to be fucking sick. They're going to be such, I mean, the cliche is a breath of fresh air, right? But they will revitalise the scene. Once a breath of fresh air is a pretty good approach to take, right? So even with all that said, though, This era will be forever remembered for what it took from us rather than what it gave us. And I hope that industry people who go around saying narratives that are somewhat akin to this, because let's be real, even if it was offline, these NA tournaments would be garbage, wouldn't they? With just Team Liquid and MIBR and Furia and fucking Gen G and stuff. Like, who would give a shit about that? So I hope those industry people essentially just be a bit more responsible at what you ask for. It's one thing if you identify the problem and say, hey, a possible solution would be this. Because like the old saying goes, be careful what you wish for, you might get it. This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Dean Tanglis, Emanuel Särnbratt, JDubs, NateDOhDoubleG, the Puyallup Tribe, Tobias Bernasconi, Xinged, and a special thanks always goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my shows? Maybe ask a question in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers? Who are the guests on my next content? Maybe you want to take part in one of those donated discussions with me where we go really deep into the weeds. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today in the description box link below.